that anyways. Okay, so this is our third mechanic session tonight. And one of our newer members, Jake Hennigan, is going to do the presentation. He's from Philadelphia. Am I right there, Jake?
Yes, correct, Stacy.
And he's been with the PMBOA for a year plus.
Yes, about a year.
Okay, so anyway, Jake's going to take it, and please interact with him if you have questions, okay? It's all yours, Jake.
Awesome. Thank you, Stacy. I am going to share my screen with you guys here. Awesome. Steve and Stacy, can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Yep.
Great. Let me move this out of the way. And I will begin. Okay, so the three items I'm going to be talking about tonight are jump ball mechanics, throw-ins, and lastly, we have timeouts. So jump ball mechanics, I included some pictures in this presentation, and for this slide here, I really think this picture kind of describes how intense a jump ball can get and how important our role as an official really is in the jump ball situation. I really like what this official is doing here. I like that he's involved, and I like that all the players are looking at him. This really shows that the official is in control here. Also, Steve and Stacy, please feel free to chime in throughout this presentation, and anyone with questions, just fire away when you have them. So what do we?
I have one quick thing, Jake.
Sure, Stacy.
Once Jake starts showing video, if there's any choppiness or anything, I'm going to ask that all participants besides him turn your video off, because we'll have a little more bandwidth to deal with the video that he's going to show. So anyway, that's just a note. Go ahead, Jake.
Awesome. Thank you, Stacy. All right, so what to do when we have a jump ball? I want to first point out the image on the right. That is going to be our jump ball mechanic. You'll see in the rule book, the NFHS rule book, that we are going to put our hand up when we blow the whistle. However, this hasn't been adopted by the state of Washington. We still go directly to the jump ball. We want to have patience when we do this. Is it really a held ball? Is there a foul in there? And when we blow the whistle, we want to make sure it's loud and we want to make sure it's strong. We want to make sure that we're aware of what the other officials are doing here. Sometimes jump balls can have double whistles, but primarily we would like if it's the official whose primary area it is that is calling this jump ball. As mentioned, the Washington state jump ball mechanic slightly differs from the one that you'll see in your high school book. Although this mechanic by the high school isn't applied by here at Washington, we still need to blow and have an understanding of what our other partners are doing, because if we blow and we have a jump ball here and our other official comes in with a hold, there's going to be a little bit of an issue here. Any questions so far around the procedures around what to do when we have a jump ball? I have a play here for you guys to look at to kind of demonstrate what we would like to do in these situations. I will jump into that now. Can anyone see my screen still? Steve?
Yeah, we're good.
Awesome.
We're good.
Lower this audio a little bit. So this is a 3-person mechanic video. Most of you are probably still learning the 2, but this just demonstrates whether it's 2 or 3-person, what we want to do as an official. So we're going to be looking at this official right here throughout this play. Play is over here. As we can see, we have a held ball, and the one thing I want to point out is what our official here did in the trail is when we have these held balls, it's important to get close to the players and make sure no extracurricular activity is occurring. We want to break on the play and make sure we're involved, because if we're involved, players aren't going to do anything they're not supposed to be doing, because as we all understand, on these held balls, things can get pretty intense. Steve or Stacy, anything on held balls prior to jumping over to the next part?
The only thing that I would mention is that, Yeah, we're teaching 2-person first of all, Jake. So it's okay to have the 3-person video, but don't get freaked out if you're watching this and you're seeing 3 and you don't think it applies. It does. The one thing I'd like to say is that sometimes, as Jake mentioned, you have one person call a held ball and one person call a foul or a violation, typically a foul. And so in those situations, you need to figure out what came first. And a general rule of thumb is if you can get away with the held ball instead of calling a foul, that's probably the better way to go, unless the foul is so bad and obvious and horrible, because players only have 5 fouls. So if we can, get away with that with a jump ball, then that might help you make your decision.
Yeah.
Jake, is this your only slide on jump balls?
Yes, that is, Steve.
Okay. So let me. I do have one other thing to jump in, and Jake mentioned this along the way, but we do sometimes we do need to make sure that it's actually a held ball situation as opposed to a foul situation. Just because the ball is on the floor does not change the rest of the rules of the game in terms of, you'll see players jumping on each other's back and ripping people's arms away to try to go get the ball. And the rest of the rules of basketball still apply, even though the ball's on the floor and loose. So we do need to be careful and not, Stacy, just a little contradiction here, and not necessarily go toward the jump ball when in fact fouls are occurring, right? So just be careful with that.
Yeah, I'm not saying don't call a foul, but if there's uncertainty on the crew whether you should call the foul or the held ball, I would go with the held ball. When somebody's on the floor and another person jumps on them to try to cause a jump ball, to me that's an obvious foul, and there's no jump ball doesn't even come into my brain. So yeah, and we don't do a very good job with those either. When players jump on, we don't like to call fouls, but those are fouls.
Yeah, I like those points, Stacy and Steve. I think it's important to understand how the tie-up occurred. Was it the offensive player being careless with the ball, or like Stacy mentioned, is it the player who just missed a jump shot and wants to go get a rebound now and instead is gonna foul or maybe get the ball? You just have to have awareness. That would be my biggest piece of advice is have awareness. Anything else here, Steve or Stacy?
No. Does anybody have any questions out in the audience?
I guess the last piece of this is the other thing that happens when the ball is on the floor is that everybody's yelling for a timeout. So whether there is control by one player on one team in order to allow for that timeout, or there isn't that control until the ball is tied up with players from opposite teams so that there is no timeout available at that point in time. That is the other thing that you'll see in jump ball situations a lot. Players and coaches all yelling for timeout.
Does everybody understand that? There's no dumb questions here. I just want to make sure you guys understand that point. Good point, Steve. Thanks.
I have a question, Carl. So basically what that means is if the dribbler loses the ball, if the ball is obviously lost, then he no longer has control, so neither team can call a timeout.
That's correct.
Correct. You need to have player control in order to have a timeout.
It's not like football.
Yeah, so if somebody's throwing an errant pass and everybody knows it's going to go out of bounds, the coach can't call a timeout, right? Or else coaches would be calling timeouts all the time to save turnovers. Thanks, Carl.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question, Carl. Awesome. Stacy and Steve, I'm going to jump over to the throw-in mechanic if that is cool for you guys.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's do it. So throw-in mechanic. In this picture here, we can see that being demonstrated. This official here is handing the ball to the player. I'll get into when we hand and when we bounce further into this presentation. The one thing I'd like to point out about what this official is doing here is we can see his his left arm is up in the air, meaning that's going to be his arm that he wants to chop. He's going to now have to count with his right. Stacy and Steve, if you disagree, please let me know, but I prefer to count away from the player, so that way my arm is not interfering with him. That's the one thing I would point out about this picture here, and I wasn't going to include it because of that, but I think it's a good talking point, and I think there might be some questions about this here as well. So I guess prior to even jumping into the presentation, Stacy or Steve, do you guys have opinions on that?
I agree with you 100%, but I think you're probably jumping ahead of where these guys are. They don't know about
Okay.
putting their hand up or,
Awesome. Yeah,
so
totally.
you mention that after you
Mhm.
go through the whole physical
sure.
process.
Yeah, totally, Stacy. All right, so what to do when we have a throw-in? The first thing, if we're coming out of a timeout, we want to blow the whistle. Or we all, let me take a step back. The first thing we want to do is blow the whistle and report our foul or our violation. Then we're going to now have a throw-in. I have this image here, as you can all see on the right, of where we want to have our throw-ins. We can see this line goes diagonally down. If the ball is anywhere to the left, we are going to throw it on the sidelines here. But if it's inside this part, we're going to go to the end line. Are there any questions around where to throw the ball in based on this image on the screen?
Just a point of clarification. If the ball is, like he said, to the left of that hashed area, then you're going to bring it in on the sideline at the point closest to where the ball went dead, right? So if it's way down in the corner, then you're going to bring it down way down on the sideline. And if it's way up high, you're going to bring it out way up high on the sideline.
This is something that officials don't do well. In fact, it's something that they don't do so well that upper levels, like college levels, have now put points on the end line and sideline where the ball is put in play, as opposed to having this follow this chart. So, but our goal here as high school officials is to put the ball in play in the right place. It's important. Coaches teach inbound plays from certain locations, and we need to be putting the ball in play at the appropriate spot, where closest to where the ball became dead.
Agreed, Steve. That's something I'm still working on right now, is making sure I'm inbounding the ball in the right spot, and mainly on the sidelines, I would say. The next thing we want to do, once we decide where we're going to administer the ball, is we're going to make eye contact with our partners prior to administering the ball. And now we get to administering the ball. So we have the ball in our hand. We have to make a decision if we're going to bounce the ball or if we're going to hand the ball. We're going to bounce the ball if the throw-in is occurring in the backcourt or on the sidelines. And once we bounce that ball, the next thing we want to do is put our hand up. And once our hand's up and the player gets the ball, the next thing we want to do is start counting to 5. We have 5 seconds, and then we blow the whistle for a 5 count. Similarly, we're going to hand the ball, or not similarly, we're going to hand the ball if the throw-in is occurring in the front court end line. Think of it as, I guess, on the end line, we want to hand the ball. We want to hand the ball to the player because we're a little more cautious because the rim's right there. They want to make a play, and the ball needs to be very secure. That's the one way I like to look at it. And then we begin our 5 count, and then ball's in. Any questions so far?
I
got a question.
Yeah, sure, Steve.
Go ahead, Oren. No, go ahead, Oren.
I'm just making sure, like, from the picture, the 2 arrows that are pointing on the sideline, that's not the only, is that the only, like, so is there 4 spots on the sideline where you can throw it in?
No.
Okay, so if it like happened down there in the corner, you would bounce it in at the corner, right?
Yeah, yeah. And if it
Okay.
was between the 2 arrows, it would be between the 2 arrows.
Okay.
Good question, Oren. Yeah, in the high school and rec game, we can put the ball wherever we want. Kind of as Steve was mentioned, there at some of the higher levels, there are spots on the court where we need to inbound the ball specifically. But this here, we can put it where we want. We just got to make sure it's on the correct line. Awesome. I have an example throw in here for us to watch.
Love the music.
I know, right?
This instance,
Awesome.
in today's episode, we'll be covering today's episode.
So here's one throw in we have here. We can see this is in the backcourt.
Today's episode,
So our official is going to be bouncing the ball to the player. We see once he bounces, he gets that arm up, starts his chop, and then chops once the player touches the ball. One thing I want to point out is that we do not chop the clock until the player touches the ball. This is crucial, especially in late game situations. That's all we have there. Stacy or Steve, anything else on that?
Play that little sequence a couple times so they can see.
Yes.
So they bounce the ball, then they put up, hopefully in the air, the arm closest to the player. And then they're going to count with their other hand the 5 seconds they get until the ball's touched in bounds, and then they chop. So this is one of my favorite things to do actually when we're on the court practicing with apprentices, because it's like a coordination contest. You have two arms doing two different things.
Sorry, Stacy, trying to get this going here.
Right? So the one arm is just up in the air waiting to chop the time as soon as somebody touches the ball, and the other arm is counting to 5, hopefully not getting to 5. So do you understand the two different things that your arms are doing?
I think I lost the video. Sorry about that, Stacy.
Okay.
And can I have an apprentice answer the question of what are we counting to 5? What has to happen by 5 seconds? Can somebody give me an answer to that?
A player that's inbound has to touch it.
Anybody else?
Any other answers?
Yes.
When the throw-in releases the ball.
Excellent.
I agree.
Excellent. Right. So when the ball is released, so if it's a long pass down the floor, you're at 4.5 and the player has let go of the ball and it's on its way down the floor, the throw-in count stops.
And then you can see when the player touches the ball, we signal the clock to begin.
And that's
What's
similar
the
to
vertical
like,
hand for?
That is the backcourt count there.
Like when we have the hand up in the air, what's that supposed to do again?
Oh, sorry.
Signify.
Yes.
hand
so-
up in the air.
Yes. Anytime we inbound the ball, we want to have our hand up in the air. That way, because it's a stoppage of time, we want to then chop the clock once the ball is touched by a player. That way,
So-
the table knows to start the clock.
Chop the clock, you just mean lower the hand that's up,
Yes.
and that'll start the
Mhm.
time.
And the mechanic is hand up here, and then it comes down like this.
Okay.
Any other questions about that?
If you guys all get this just like that, then you're brilliant, because most people have more questions.
I have a question. What if they throw the ball in within that 5 seconds, but then the next player, nobody inbound, gets the ball within that 5 seconds? It's
Doesn't
goes
matter.
over the 5 seconds. Doesn't matter.
So
Right,
is there is there a
Good point.
situation where I thought that that there is a 5-second count and it doesn't count until somebody that's in bounds actually touches the ball?
No, that's not correct. It's on the release. So the thrower in releases the ball, the 5-second count ends.
But is there like a situation where it is like not throwing it in specifically, but
So you might be thinking about the 10-second count
Yeah, she's thinking
And
about the 10-second count.
in the backcourt, where so that if you're counting to 10 in the backcourt, the ball has to get to front court status. It needs to either touch the floor or a player in the front court within 10 seconds.
But the
Different
closely
from-
guarded rule deals with 5 seconds too, so she might be thinking of that one.
You know, I think the backcourt one is a better analogy. That's not an analogy, because in the backcourt, if you release the ball towards the front court and it's in the air when you get to 10 seconds and it hasn't achieved front court status, then that's a violation. Whereas on a throw-in, once you release the ball, you're never gonna, and within the 5 seconds, you're never gonna have a 5-second violation. So that, I think that's a really good way to show the differences between the two.
Okay.
Does that make a little more sense?
Yeah, it makes sense now. Thank
The
you.
other thing I would say about throw-in mechanics is it's something that you will do as an official a lot, 50 times a game. And the first time you go out and practice it, it's going to feel completely foreign. And in the course of 3 days or 2 days, you'll have it down cold. So don't freak out the first couple of times when you got the wrong hand in the air and you can't count and put the hand in the air at the same time. It'll all become second nature to you in no time.
Agreed, Steve. And one thing I like to do is I like to just watch whoever I'm working with and seeing what they do for it, just kind of learning other styles, seeing other styles, and then kind of figuring out what works best for you. Another thing I'd like to point out here is for the throw-in mechanic, if we have our number 11 here in white who's throwing the ball in, throw the ball out of bounds without a player touching it. I kind of want to challenge the class here prior to telling you guys the answer. I guess, where do you guys think we would inbound the ball next? If number 11 throws the ball in and no one touches the ball and it goes out of bounds.
The same spot where number 11 is right now.
Same spot.
Yep, correct. If someone touches it, we then want to make sure we're putting it at the location where it then went out of bounds. So nice work. Awesome.
Hey, I have one other quick thing before
sure,
on
Stacey.
throw-ins. So part of the reason why we want to bounce the ball from as often as possible, except for the front court end line, is it allows us to step back from the play and have a lot more better peripheral vision of more that's happening on the floor. So once the inbound player has the ball, I don't want you to look at that player because they're not going to do anything illegal, maybe except step on the line. So I prefer that you keep that person in your peripheral vision and you keep your eyes out on the floor for, who might be coming for a pass or who might be holding, somebody who's cutting to the ball, et cetera, because there's only two of you out there. And if you're all focused on the guy standing out of bounds with the ball, then your partner's got a lot to cover.
Agreed, Stacy. Another thing a last thing before we jump on to the next section, but we also want to make sure we're giving the inbounder enough room to make the pass, especially at the recreational level and high school level. We want to make sure our players are developing the right way. And this is just an easy thing we can do to make sure that's happening. Stacy or Steve, anything else in regards to
Yeah, I do. I thought of another thing. So there's two different kinds of throw-ins. There's a spot throw-in, and then there's a throw-in that happens after a made basket. So you guys all have played, after a made basket, basically the other team can take the ball out on the end line and run around before they pass the ball in. But on a spot throw-in, like when the ball gets knocked out of bounds or after a violation or a foul, when there's a particular spot that the ball's coming in, the inbounder has to stay within side to side within a 3-foot space. I don't know how I bet maybe Steve's going to have to describe this better, but you can go as deep as you want. So if their sidelines are like a mile away, the thrower in could back way off the out of bounds line. If somebody's there in their face, they can back away and that's okay, but they can only go like 3 feet to either side of the spot. Okay. And that's not traveling. There's no such thing as traveling on a throw-in. It's just what that player is allowed to do.
So you guys have heard this once in the Rule 4 presentation on designated spot. You'll hear it tonight, and then the Thursday session is actually the rules on throw-in. So you're going to hear this for a third time. So you'll have a bunch of times where you're going to have an opportunity to learn this piece of it.
I have a question. It's Carl.
Yeah.
What part of the half-point line, or the half court line, is front court and back court? There were a couple questions on the quizzes where they were talking about going back and forth over the half court or the half court line.
Go ahead, Jay.
Is the edge of the line, the backcourt edge of the line, is that in backcourt or forecourt?
Carl, it's going to be treated as an out of bounds boundary. So I believe it's as soon as you touch the line.
As soon as you touch the line, no matter which side.
So the front court and the back court are different sizes. The front court is smaller than the back court.
Yeah, the half court line belongs to the back court. So as soon as you cross the little line between the front court and the first edge of that line, you're in the back court. Make sense, Carl?
Not quite yet.
Okay, ask another question.
Are you saying that the line is the back court then? The whole
The
line,
yeah.
any black of the line is still the back court?
Correct.
Okay,
Gotcha.
got it.
Does that make it better, Carl?
Yes, the entire line is backcourt.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Somebody had written in here, and I know there's people are answering and stuff, but I'm just going to read in the chat, Jake. What do you call
Yeah,
when
sure.
a player moves the baseline, moves on the baseline on an inbound when he or she cannot?
Yeah, sure. Well, first off, I try to prevent that from happening by letting the player know if they can move or not. That would be the first thing I do. But if it does happen, if they are moving outside of that box that Stacy did mention, it really depends on the level of the game. But if it's a very competitive game, I am going to blow the whistle and I'm going to call a violation and give the other team the ball. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, the person who asked it said he used to think that was a travel, but then I said there was no such thing as a travel and a throw-in, so he just wanted to know what it was called. So it's just a throw-in violation.
Yeah, a throw-in violation, correct.
I have a question about that too. So if you're on a throw-in, like how many steps can you take for it to be a violation, or no steps? Like, do you have to, keep both feet on the ground, or like, yeah, what makes it a violation exactly?
Well, just imagine if there's a spot, the referee says, this is where you're bringing the ball in. Then you have to kind of imagine in your brain 3 feet to either side of that. So it's not really steps. It's just you have to decide, like, how wide is that total of 6 feet going to be? And if the person goes out of it, then you're going to call a violation. Unless somebody's really moving far, you're probably not going to call it. But 6 feet, because 6 feet's a pretty good distance.
Okay,
Agreed.
I have a question.
Good question, Rowan. Yeah, sure, Roger.
In the backcourt throw-in video, the last video we were watching, does it matter where there's player number 11 and the referee? Does it matter where the referee is standing, more backcourt or on the right-hand side or the left-hand side? Because there's also relative to the position of where the people managing the clock, whether they can see. And the second question is, in that example, with those two players, number 11 and the other player, there wasn't a defense player there, but if there was both defenders there, and if they were having trouble inbounding and they exceed that 5 seconds, then what?
Yeah, those are great questions. Stacy, I can take these ones. So as we could see in that video, number 11 was in the entire play, and the entire game was on the inside of the official. So anytime we are inbounding the ball, we want to make sure that we're outside of everything. We never want to be in the way of the players. So in most cases, we're going to be stepping away and making sure we're administering that ball on the side where the players aren't going to be. And then the second part of that, is going to be, if we have defenders there and they do get a 5-second count, we're going to keep our hand up. We're going to count the 5 so everyone can see it. And then once we get to that 5, I like to wait, just in case your count might be a little fast, I like to wait that 0.2 after that final 5 and then blow the whistle and then call a 5 count. And this is going to be our signal right here. And then the defending team will get that ball right where the offensive team had it originally. Does that answer the questions there?
Yes. Thanks.
Awesome.
Let me see. Yeah. 5-second count starts when they touch the ball, when the thrower in touches the ball. That's correct. When the ball's at the thrower in's disposal. So this is another,
Yep.
you want to talk about like after a basket, all that stuff? Go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, sure. I was just laughing because sometimes I've seen if teams aren't getting outside of a timeout fast enough, I've seen some fellow officials put the ball, because Stacy said, at the throw at the player's discretion. So if a team's slow getting out of a timeout and the horns have already sounded, the ball is at that team's discretion.
Disposal.
The ball is at that team's disposal. It's not something I like to do personally, but that's what Stacy means by at disposal. Once the ball goes through the rim, us as officials need to make sure the team that's going to be getting the ball has access to the ball. If the ball goes through the rim and it's right underneath the rim, and the player's trying to set up some kind of press break and isn't really going for the ball, we have to start our count as long as they have access to the ball. Stacy, does that kind of cover those topics?
Yeah. Does that make sense to people? So on a spot throw in, the ball is going to be at the disposal of the thrower in as soon as they have the ball. So it's not when the referee bounces it to them, it's when they catch it. Okay. But the ball can be at the disposal of a team, like after a shot, the ball is at the disposal of a team when the referee deems that the new offense has access to the ball. So it might not physically be in their possession, but if they're just hanging around waiting for, I don't know what, and they're not picking the ball up, then you can start your count before they touch it.
You are going to hear all this again on Thursday. We're going to cover this all in the rules section on Thursday.
They'll be smart.
Yep. Hearing it more than once is a good thing.
Awesome. Stacy, I'm going to jump into timeouts if
Absolutely. Yeah.
cool. Last thing actually I'd like to say is just if you're worried about your throwing mechanic, just, I'm sure you guys have heard this a lot, just go in front of the bathroom mirror and just practice yourself, get your stopwatch out and see if your 5 is an actual 5. Little things like that. Next slide. Oops. Cool. Timeout mechanics. I really like this picture here because it's showing our official, Mark Lindsay, really trying to listen and understand the coach, even though he is coming at him in a pretty intense manner. This coach obviously wanted a timeout and didn't get it. I really enjoyed this picture. So what to do when we have a timeout? First thing is when we hear timeout, we want to blow the whistle and put our hand up for stoppage. We want to then verbalize a timeout has been called. Then we want to ask the calling coach or player if they want a 30-second timeout or a 60-second timeout. We are going to have 2 30-second timeouts and 3 60-second timeouts throughout the period of a game. These can be used whenever and however. Actually, there may be a couple rules on calling back-to-back timeouts, but I'll go into that later. And then to our right, we have our mechanics for our 60-second and our 30-second timeout. Jeff Shelton, who was one of my teachers when I first moved over here, always told me we don't want to see the thumbs. So when we go for a 30-second timeout, we want to do it this way and not this way. Make sure our fingers are down. And then once we signal that, once we signal, we'll let the table and opposing team know what kind of timeout was through that signal. And then the last bullet point I have here is just having awareness of when teams want to call a timeout. There's always situations towards the end of a game when this may be the case. And as an official, that's just very important to have is that overall awareness of when a coach may want one. Prior to jumping into the video, does anyone have any questions on the mechanic of the timeouts here?
you want to explain to them about like, when would you expect a coach to call a timeout?
Yeah, sure, Stacy. So one situation I can remember clearly last year was a pretty intense game I was officiating, and I was coming down the court, and a team had just made a 3-point shot to take a 1-point lead. There was 10 seconds left, and the losing team was going to get the ball inbounded. Kind of as Stacy was just mentioning, the ball was at their disposal. And I was now administering that inbounds, and I was not aware that their coach wanted a timeout. And I should have, knowing that basketball IQ, they're now down 1. They're going to want a timeout most likely. The coach was screaming and screaming. My partners didn't pick it up. And then we finally get down the court, and he's right in front of my face, and his face is pretty red, and he's yelling at me. So that would just be one situation there I can think of, is just kind of bringing that IQ out there and knowing really when these situations can pop up, because that's one way to get a coach on your bad side is not granting a timeout when they would like it. However, as officials, a coach can call a timeout, but it is our final decision if we are going to grant that timeout or not. Anything
Can a
else there,
coach
Stacey?
tell you ahead of time? Like, hey, if he after this free throw, I want timeout.
Yeah, so that's a great question. They can do that. However, they still need to call that timeout physically. So a coach will sometimes still communicate it to you, and I'll just make sure to let them know, hey, okay, but you still need to signal it. So that's a good question. Any other questions on situations like those or timeout mechanics?
We have a brilliant bunch.
And can the team that made the shot after a made shot, can they call timeout, or only the team that's inbounding?
Yes, good question. So I believe they cannot call timeout. It's only the team that has the ball after the ball has gone into, or I'm sorry, I apologize. They can call timeout, but again, it has to be at the discretion. It has to be the official's decision. If the offensive team gets the ball and the play's already going, most likely I'm not going to grant that coach the timeout. But if there is a little bit of stoppage and I know ahead of time, I am going to give him that timeout. Stacy or Steve, is that correct?
Yeah, once the bottom line is, once that you deem the ball is at the disposal of the inbounder, then the defensive team cannot call a timeout.
Yep.
But before that time, between the time the ball goes through the basket until then, either team can call a timeout.
Okay.
And it basically has to do with team control, right? So you need to have, it needs to either not be any control, or you need to have team control in order to be, the ball either needs to be dead, or you need to have team control in order to be able to call timeout. And so the defensive team, once the ball becomes live, once the thrower in has the ball, you can no longer call timeout as the other team.
I have a question. You said earlier about the level of basketball. If it's more competitive, more varsity versus JV or something like that, one of the questions asks, can you encourage a player to throw it in because you're counting? And they say no, but if it's maybe not as advanced level, JV or rec or something, are there times when you might do that? Or the times when you might inform the players, the coach a little bit more?
Me personally, I wouldn't, because some coaches don't want you coaching their kids. And they'll figure it. I mean, you can talk to the kids, but you can't say, hurry up, you have 1 second, you know?
Well, look, but when you're doing your first game and it's 4th grade CYO, and the kid barely knows where to stand to get out of bounds and doesn't know which way to even throw the ball, whether it should be against the wall or onto the court,
yeah,
absolutely.
Well,
but we're teaching
yeah,
you the rules as opposed to the practicality of refereeing a very young kid's game.
Yeah, and with the young kids, you can get around that by having a really slow count. You know, there's different things you can do to show that you really understand what's going on out there.
Cool. Stacy and Steve, I'm going to jump to this video that I really like. And this is one of those situations where kind of having awareness of when we want to blow the timeout. And it's not the Chris Webber infamous timeout call.
Well, that one's going
And-
back there.
Yeah. Okay, so prior to showing the clip, we can see it's SEC game. It's not too close, but it's getting down towards the end of the game here. So once it's getting towards the end of the game, our awareness has to be elevated as much as possible here. And then we can see this official here coming in because he notices it. And I like how adamant he really is about making sure his partner knows a timeout is called there. Try to show this one more time. Similar to the jump ball situation, if we have a timeout call and
You
it's
enlarge
gonna,
that.
yeah, sure. If we have a timeout call and it is similar to jump ball in that there can be times where it's very intense, and we need to make sure we're controlling the situations. Clearly, Arkansas's coach is not happy here as he thought the 5-second count was supposed to be called. So this kind of goes hand in hand with the administering a throw-in as well. It's my timeout video there. I believe I have just one more slide to show everyone where we want to stand on timeouts. Oh, cool. We actually have one more. All right. So when we're reporting to the table for timeouts, the first thing we want to do before reporting to the table is making sure all players go to their benches. We want to tell the table what color team is taking the timeout, whether it's a player or a coach, the type of timeout, and then to start the clock. The clock as in the timeout duration. For a 30-second timeout, we want to make sure that we are warning teams of the first horn. This first horn occurs at 15 seconds. We're going to go over, the official closest to each team is going to go over, signal 1, and say first horn. Similarly, for the 60-second timeout, we're going to do it at the 45-second mark, and then we're going to signal first horn again. Sometimes if the second horn happens and the teams aren't out of the huddles, we go to our positions. And this was going back to when I said some fellow officials like to start the count. If the team is being deliberate and they aren't getting out of the huddle, we can start the game. I'm telling the teams that is first horn, make sure to put your hand out there because that's always key to make sure they're actually seeing the signal. And then where to stand for timeout. We have some nice graphics here that Stacy got for me. For the two-person mechanic, on a 30-second timeout, we want to stand in the front of the circle, right here. And then the person who is going to be inbounding the ball is going to stay where they're at. This person could be here. This person could be here. But if they're here next to the bench, we're going to make sure to take a step back. Similarly, if they're here, we're going to make sure to take a step back, hold the ball. And then in this situation, the lead's going to go over to the home team and the trail is going to go over to the visiting team to give our signals. For a 60-second timeout, they're just going to take a step back and stand here on the opposite side. And then below here, we just have our signals again. Any questions on where to stand during a timeout or when to tell a team first horn?
Did you talk about holding the ball on the hip facing the direction you're going to go? Did you mention that?
I did not, but that's a good point, Stacy. So if we are standing here in the lead, we want to make sure we are holding the ball on our hip and facing this way down. So if we're in this situation, like I mentioned, where the ball is going to be inbound on the home team's bench, we want to make sure we're standing right here or around there. And we want to make sure we're facing that team and we're holding the ball on our hip. Holding the ball on our hip just makes us look professional, and it's something easy we can do. Did that cover that part, Stacy?
Yeah, just make sure that it's a good way. Sometimes when you're standing there for a timeout, you forget which way the ball's gonna go when once you start play again. So if you hold the ball on the hip facing that direction, you look professional and like you don't have to remind yourself or remember which way the ball's going after the throw in.
Oh yeah, good point, Stacy. I didn't even pick up on that, but yeah, totally.
So questions? Somebody has a question online. Brad, why don't you just ask it out loud? Or was that not this? Do you guys hold a piece of something in your pocket? Is that for jump balls?
AP arrows, yeah.
To hold position. I think that's what that means. You know, some people do, some people wear rubber bands and they switch it from wrist to wrist. Some people have a coin in their pocket and they switch it back and forth. And you're gonna probably have to start out doing that because the tables aren't gonna be that great at keeping the possession arrow. I would encourage you to try to do it in your head, to try to start doing it in your head at some point, because you don't want to be you don't want to be seen doing that once you start doing high school basketball, flipping things from pocket to pocket and so forth. So actually, as the higher level you work, the fewer jump balls there's going to be and the easier it is to remember. But when you're doing the little kids, it seems like there's a jump ball every, 30 seconds. And you really can't rely on the scoreboard for the younger kids. I'm word of warning.
I don't even know if you can rely on it at some of the higher levels as well, Stacy. So it's just always important to really understand where the arrow is.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Anyone want to know where to put your hands? Questions like anything like that?
Anyone want to do a how about you unshare your presentation, Jake? And we'll get somebody volunteer to do inbound basketball.
Sure, Stacy.
So I want somebody to volunteer to do what happens when you inbound a basketball, and I'll tell you when the ball's released and I'll tell you when the ball's touched. Who wants to be the brave soul? So Steve, do you want to do this really quick just so they can see what I'm talking about?
Sure. You just said inbound the basketball?
Yeah, so you bounce the ball to somebody and then you put one arm up, and so I just want to see what that looks like.
And see if I can find enough space here to be able to do this. All right, so we're inbounding the ball here on the sideline. I'm telling the player, hold your spot there on the sideline. And then I'm bouncing the ball to them here. And then I'm taking a step back away from them, which you may not even be able to see me anymore. And now I'm counting. I'm starting my count.
So he's going to count. Now the ball's released.
And then the ball comes in play and I'm chopping the clock in.
Okay. So who wants to do that? Come on, somebody be brave. Nobody's going to be brave. Okay.
I'll go.
Who's that?
Ken.
Awesome. Thanks, Ken.
All right. I got room here. All right, can you see me okay?
Uh-huh.
No.
Well, now you're not. No, you went away. Well, that's
what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna do this. Hang on just a second here.
You don't have your video on. There you go.
Oh, there you go.
There we are.
There's Ken.
All right, cool. So pass the ball to the throw in.
Take a step
hand
back.
up. Yep, hand up.
That's
There's
okay.
a box in my way. Hand up. And then I start my count.
And now the ball's released, but it's not touched yet. So you stop the count, and then the ball's touched, and you chop. Okay, so they're two different things. I just want to make sure you guys see that, because it's, like I said, it's a coordination contest the first couple times you do it. Thanks, Ken.
Yeah, you bet.
Nice work, Ken. There's some times where we can even be going up halfway through the court with our arm up in the air. We just need to make sure we're waiting until the offensive player touches the ball.
All right, let's have somebody do a timeout. Okay, so the timeout. Am I
I'll do a
showing-
timeout.
You're gonna do a timeout, so I want to show you what I want you to do first. Okay? So,
Stacy, you need to turn your camera on.
oh God, okay. I was wondering why it wasn't showing up. Start video, there we go. Can you see me now?
Yep.
Okay, so you're gonna, I want to do the report to the table, not the calling timeout, okay? So you get to the table and you're gonna say, wait for the players to get to the benches. And you wait, okay, then you sit, then you point to the bench, like the white bench that called the timeout. You say, white, coach, 30-second timeout, start the clock. Did you see all that, Steve? Was I in the window?
That was good.
Okay, so go ahead, Carl, I want to see that.
Okay. Try to do this without blocking all the light out. So we've got the timeout. I go up to the scorer's table, tell them that it's a 30-second timeout.
No, yeah, the order is very important. You want to do it exactly how I did it. So you're gonna say white, coach, 30 seconds, start the clock. Okay, so it's basically like color, number, type of timeout, start the clock. Red, 2, if number 2 calls the timeout, full timeout, start the clock.
Oh boy.
So point to the bench that called the timeout and give it a
Black
call.
timeout. Coach, 30-second.
Start the clock.
Start the clock.
Point to the table, start the clock. Okay. Thank you, Carl. Anybody else want to try? You're all gonna have to do it sooner or later, so come on.
Yeah, I'll try.
Thanks.
So we got blue timeout, or we got blue, coach, 30-second timeout, start the clock.
Perfect. Okay, it's really important to get that whole sequence and make sure you don't start saying that stuff until the players are all at their benches. That gives the coach their full timeout instead of saying all that start the clock and the players aren't even at the benches yet. Okay, it's a good way to get good report. Go ahead, Doug.
I just want to double check. So this all starts with the coach calling the timeout, right? And you blow the whistle, and then you raise your hand with the open hand.
Yeah. So
Okay.
In fact,
and then that's when all the people clear out to the benches, and then you call that.
Right. So at this, I'm going to have you get on the camera actually, because I'm going to make you do the whole thing with me.
Okay.
Okay. So when a coach calls a timeout, you put up a straight hand, an open hand, like on a violation. Okay. Boop. And then you're going to point. You're going to say white timeout. Okay. And then you and your partner are going to decide where's the ball coming in. Okay. So you want to do all that before you go over to the table to report it to anybody. Okay. So boop, white time. And then you figure out where's the ball coming in. As you're running by the coach, if he hasn't given you a signal for 30 or full, you're going to say 30 or full. If he doesn't talk to you, then you're just going to assume it's a 60-second timeout. You don't need to wait if he doesn't want to talk to you. And then you go to the table and you'll say, white coach, full timeout, start the clock.
Okay.
So Doug, I want to see you do that.
Awesome. Let me start this video. So I do.
Oh, I like this.
Yeah.
I got the whistle ready. Yeah. So hands up, right?
Uh-huh.
I look over, I go, blue, coach, 60-second timeout.
Not yet.
Shoot.
So when you call the timeout, you're just gonna you're stopping the game and you're pointing to you say blue timeout.
Blue timeout.
Okay, now this is where you figure out, you don't do that yet. You're gonna ask your partner, where's the ball coming in? Because you want to make sure you know all that before you go to the table. Okay,
And
Okay.
where is the ball?
So-
Where is the ball coming in?
in general.
From the sideline?
Well, if the ball was in the low post and for whatever reason the coach wants to call a timeout, where's the ball going to come in?
From the low post?
Yeah. Where's it going to come in?
Is it not from the low post?
Well, where is it going to come in? It's not going to come in at the low post. It's got to be out of bounds somewhere, right?
Is
So where-
is it on the sideline closest to where the timeout was called?
no,
So
it's
it could be,
Baseline.
is it always the baseline?
no.
I mean, oh, okay. I got you.
Yeah, maybe I'm not understanding this right. So they're checking it in from the baseline, right?
They're
Maybe
throwing
so
from the
you're saying the
baseline.
post. The ball's at the post. They call the timeout. So I'm gonna go take a step back behind the baseline, and that's where I'm gonna pass the ball. Or I guess that's where it's gonna be taken out, right?
Right. It's going to come in on the end line because it was in the, in the low post, and it's going to come in like right outside the key, never
So-
inside the key.
So we had the graphic, and you guys need to study it a little bit, right? But kind of the
Right.
point that I was trying to make is, when somebody's calling timeout, you don't put the ball in where they called timeout. You put the ball back in play where the ball was when the whistle was blown and the ball became dead, right? So if it was up above the free throw line or up above the free throw circle, you would take the ball out on the side of one side or the other. If it was in the post, you would be taking it out on the end line, where
Okay.
we showed you that graphic.
That was
study
where
that graphic.
the shading, and then the
Yes.
white section,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
okay.
the key is there. It's not where, the coach calls timeout, so you put the ball in next to the coach. And it's probably one of the most important things that you do in a timeout is determine where the ball's coming in, because then the players and the teams get into their timeout and they strategize plays. So they need to know exactly where the ball's coming in, and the ball needs to come in exactly where it should, because they're strategizing a play around that. So
Okay.
of all the
So-
things that we've just talked about here, the thing that to me that's most important with the timeout is, as Stacy said, get together with your partner and figure out where the ball's coming in.
Okay. So then I would blow the whistle, raise my hand, go to my partner, and confirm where if it's going to be taken at the white section or the shaded section. Those would be baseline or on the sideline.
Mm-hmm.
And then after I determine that, that's when I would go and say if it's a coach's timeout or a player timeout, and then I would do either the 30 seconds or the full 60 seconds.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So you call the timeout, boop, white timeout. You don't necessarily have to have a conversation, get right next to your partner, but you want to look at them and you say, and one of you is going to say, okay, the ball's going to be down here end line, or, just as long as you both know. Okay. And then the
Okay.
person who's not calling the ball, who hasn't called the timeout, they probably want to stand there for a second where the ball's going to come in. So everybody knows where the ball's coming in.
Okay.
Does that make
And
sense? Then you go running off in front of the table and you do what we were practicing, right?
Okay.
White, coach, full timeout, start the clock. So it's a long process. It's not just like you call the timeout and then you do all the signaling. You know what I'm saying? It's a process.
Right. Okay.
I
When
wanna
you,
see-
sorry,
Go ahead.
when you initially call the timeout, do you want to vocalize blue timeout?
Yes.
It'll be taken out on the baseline. Do
No, you
want
just want to say blue timeout.
blue timeout?
And you're talking with your partners, and you're probably going to point to where it's going to come in.
Okay.
The more information you give, the better for everybody.
Yeah.
And being able to tell your partner whether it's a 60-second timeout or a 30-second timeout is helpful, because then the other team your partner can help inform the other team as to whether it's a 60-second timeout or a 30-second timeout.
Well, not even just to your partner, but like you said, the coaches want to strategize her, from wherever they are. So do you want to tell the coach, it'll be taken out from the baseline or it'll be taken out from the sideline?
Yeah, I think when you're calling the timeout and you say, blue timeout, and then you look at your partner and between the two of you, you're going to say where the ball's coming in. If that official's standing where the ball's going to come in, then everybody knows.
And
Right?
sometimes the coach might ask you, You know, is the
Yeah.
ball coming in on the sideline or the end line? And you can tell them. You know, it's not a secret. You can definitely tell them.
Hey,
I have two questions.
go ahead.
One question, at this level, they cannot advance the ball on a timeout, correct?
Correct.
Okay, the other question is, when do you and how do you determine whether it's a 60-second or a 30-second? You put your hand up and call the timeout because somebody calls a timeout.
Right.
You then look at the coach and shrug like 60-second, 30-second?
Well, you call the timeout, you figure out where the ball's coming in.
Right.
And then if the coach hasn't, a lot of times the coaches will be standing there, timeout, then you know what they want. But if they don't
Okay.
do that, as you're going past them, you ask them, you want 30 or 60? And if they don't
Because they're
answer,
still getting their people bench.
they're still, the people
At
are
that
getting
point,
to the
they're
bench.
still getting to the bench.
Right.
So there's time to do that. Okay.
But if he doesn't answer you or he's so busy with his kids, then you don't, try to force it out of him. Just assume he wants a 60 and then go to the table and do the signaling that we talked about.
Okay.
Okay.
Is
Doug?
it possible for a coach to change a 30 to a 60 without losing the 30?
In the middle of a timeout after you've
Yeah.
reported it to the table? No.
Okay.
Hey, Stacy, can I throw something in here?
Absolutely, Scott. How you doing?
I'm good. So have you guys talked about live dead ball officiating? Because a lot of times in timeouts when those players are crossing each other, going to their benches, you can have some activity there.
No, we haven't. So go ahead and elaborate if you'd like to.
Well, basically, when the ball is dead is when the players can get in the most trouble, it seems like. Because, when the ball's live, they've got to be playing basketball. So on a timeout, a lot of times the players will cross each other on the court going towards their benches. So you have to be real cognizant of contact or comments or that kind of thing, and just make sure that's one of the reasons you go to report and you're going to stand there and wait till everybody gets to their bench before you do anything, because you're really watching the players. So something to think about.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Does everybody know what he's talking about?
Yeah, the end of Hoosiers.
Exactly. One thing I wanted we haven't really spent any time talking about it. I know that Jake said that when we do the 30-second timeout, we want to use our fingers and touch our shoulders and not use the thumbs. We want to use the rest of our hand. When we call a 60-second timeout, we want to, it's like they say we're pulling taffy. So your hands start together and then you open them up and you pull them wide. Okay. So that's what that signal looks like. Exactly. Thanks, Carl. Jake, anything else? Steve? I was just trying to make this a little more interesting.
Yeah, no, I like that point there, Stacy. I'm trying to think if there's anything else for the timeouts here.
I actually thought that Scott's point was something that we would have otherwise missed in the mechanic of calling your timeout.
Yep.
Like a lot of things in life, we're better off being slower than quicker, and so we shouldn't be in a rush to get to the table and to report the timeout. We should be watching the players first off, getting to their benches before we kind of go through the rest of our motions. And because as Scott said, that's where things can happen. And if you've got your head down or in a different place, you've suddenly got a word spoken or a shove happening and you don't know what happened. And that's not a good thing.
And it's happened to all of us in spite of all our wisdom, or maybe that's how we got our wisdom.
Yeah, and as Scott mentioned, now that I'm thinking of it, I've also seen it happen coming out of timeouts as well. So it's especially we're more susceptible now as us officials are moving around to our spots. It can happen just as easily coming out of the timeouts as going into them.
Yeah. Just beware when the whistle blows and the players think they can do what they want to do, bad things happen. So we need to watch them. Anybody else? No questions? Okay, everybody get your quizzes in. I'm going to send you a quick yes, no for the next, for the mentorship training session. And we'll just go from there. So I guess we'll see you on Thursday for our last rules session.
What quizzes are due by now?
By Thursday, you should have all of them except 7 and 8 done.
All right, thank you.
Uh-huh. All right, I guess we'll call it a night. Thanks, Jake. I appreciate your talk.
Yeah, no problem, Stacy. See you later, team.
Thank
See
you,
ya.
guys.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay.